You're listening to The Download from Sounds Profitable, your daily source for the essential news in the business of podcasting. I'm Gavin Gaddis. Here's what you need to know for today, Wednesday, April 2nd. First up, what is a podcast? Preserving its essence, structuring for expansion. Complementing Oxford Road and Veritone One CEO Dan Granger's keynote at Evolutions by Podcast Movement, a new white paper has been published by Oxford Road. The report is built off an Edison research study surveying 4,000 plus Americans, as well as over 30 creatives, executives, and thought leaders, with the goal of reaching a clear, workable definition of podcasting. In his presentation, Granger highlighted the lack of a measurement standard and common definitions is causing podcasting to move backwards in some ways. As video waxes and open RSS wanes, things podcasting could do easily when it was audio forward are now things that might scare away advertisers, as there is no common standard. Up next, why hit play on a podcast influencing the decision to listen. In this piece, Ulster uses the 2024 data to give insight into how people are finding podcasts in Canada. Topic of discussion remains a leading gateway to podcast listening, with 38% of the 1,195 respondents saying they got into podcasting to find a show about a topic they were interested in. Music burnout is also a contributing factor, especially with younger listeners. 28% of all respondents said they started listening to a podcast because they got bored of listening to music and wanted something more engaging, which is up from 20% in the 2020 version of the study. When filtered for just the 18 to 34 demographic, that jumps up to 34% of 2024 respondents saying they came to podcasting due to music burnout. Next up, maximizing podcast reach, strategies for expanding to new platforms and audiences. Triton Digital EVP of Podcast and Content Delivery, Sharon Taylor, Bumper co-founder Dan Meisner, and Quill co-founder Fatima Zaidi gathered at Evolutions by Podcast Movement to address common questions about growing podcast audiences. Dan Meisner evoked journalist Casey Newton to make a distinction. There's a difference between traffic and audience. The core difference being traffic will move the needle, but it dries up the second you stop paying for it or expending the energy necessary to get that attention in the first place. Zaidi coached consistency as the most important aspect of growing an audience in 2025. Repurposing content for discovery in other channels is one option. An audio-forward podcast shouldn't live in isolation on audio apps. Newsletters, cross-promotion, multi-channel networks, audiences take time and consistent effort to grow. And finally, March 2025 research highlights cross-platform convergence, navigating the new reality of watched, heard, and bundled audio. Sound Insights has published the March edition of their monthly research roundup, looking to the top 10 bits of podcast research published, along with top-level insights. The big headline, of course, is Edison Research's annual Infinite Dial, finding podcasting has hit the mainstream. For the first time in the report's history, more than half of Americans, 55% specifically, report consuming a podcast within the past month. We'd like to encourage our readers and listeners alike to subscribe to Sound Insights. As more focus on the valuable research being done on the industry there is, the better equipped the business of podcasting will be for the future. And for the rest of the news, Spooler has published an intro to Dialogue, a new node-based tool that turns podcast assembling into a flow that can incorporate branches based on listener data and real-time connections to text-to-speech and LLM services. Streaming and podcast hosting platform Disktopia has entered into a partnership with Earbud Podcast Collective to deliver curated podcast recommendations directly to Disktopia users. Wondery has announced a true crime miniseries from award-winning Brazilian journalist Chico Filetti, Don't Cross Cat. Aaron Matthews, founder of Creative Fix, and Nova Entertainment's Adam Johnson have announced a launch of Original Audio, a creative agency focusing on delivering effective audio advertising. Original Audio has signed an exclusive representation deal with AI-powered audio production company AudioStack. And finally, Bloomberg has covered the announcement that Sony and Wondery have entered into Patreon partnership, which will include publishers bringing shows like Getting Better with Jonathan Van Ness and Scamfluencers to Patreon. The platform will provide partners with in-depth data, marketing support, and additional features, including plans to bring more media groups to the platform in the coming months. Be sure to check out the links to every article mentioned right in your podcast listening